Welcome to International Securities Exchange's podcast series. Facilitated by renowned educators, ISE podcasts are intended to teach beginning as well as seasoned investors the ins and outs of trading. To find an updated list of podcasts, please visit www.ise.com/podcasts. Please be sure to listen to our important message following this episode regarding the risks of investing in exchange-traded options.
Now, what about foreign bonds? Well, folks, I am not a fan of foreign bonds for a couple of reasons. It's buyer beware. And right now, I'll be frank with you, I'm not really much of a fan of bonds in general right now just because of the fact that interest rates are so low, and I would just have a hard time jumping on the bond bandwagon at this point in time as an investor. Not to say that we don't have anyone in bonds. We do have some people in bonds, but typically they're very short term, and we're just looking for like a glorified liquid money market when we're doing it. Once again, I'm not against bonds. It's just that you need to have, it needs to be in the right situation, and I am very, very cautious of them in today's marketplace. But foreign bonds are something with which I have a concern. It is buyer beware. It's kind of like when you're buying a used car. If you go to a dealer, granted, you can still buy a lemon from a used car dealer, but you at least have some place to go back. You can file a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. You can tell your friends to never buy a car from there, or whatever the case may be. There's at least some course of action with which you could take should something happen. Now, if you buy a used car from someone out of the classified ads, then it's buyer beware, and you really better know what you're doing. And you should have a good sense of how a car works and what you're looking for when doing so. And that's kind of the way with which I look at buying foreign bonds, in that how well do you really know the company? If I want to buy a corporate bond on XYZ stock, there's a lot of resources in the U.S. that can help me to learn about what that bond's all about. And does that mean that it's impossible for the bond to go down and that it's always going to be a great investment? No, but I like the ability to research U.S. bonds if need be, whether it's a muni bond, whether it is a corporate bond. If it's a U.S. government treasury, then I usually don't do too much research on the validity of it, just because if they go belly up, then quite frankly, the client's portfolios is the least of my problems, because then we got some serious chaos going on. So with that, you don't have a lot of ability to research the company. You can, and there are research engines out there, but just quite frankly, just my personal opinion, I like staying close to home. I think that there's enough opportunities in the U.S. to where we can do it. Now, the other thing, how well do you know the foreign government? What if the government decides to say, oh, all bonds are just done right now. We are not going to pay you. Well, I guess granted, the U.S. government could do that as well, but I feel a lot more comfortable in the U.S. with that risk than I would overseas. And the other thing that you need to have something with which to be concerned, who actually regulates the bond market with which you're trading overseas. So in terms of foreign bonds, maybe if you're in a foreign bond mutual fund with which you trusted, but typically it's something with which I shy away from just because of that reason. You can only do so many things, but the people that do well in foreign bonds, at least from my experience, it seems that that's all they do. They live and breathe the foreign bonds. But Mike, I need an income-based investment. I am looking for income, and I want to have exposure to one of these overseas currencies. Do you have any suggestions? Well, as a matter of fact, I do. First off, let's tackle the age-old debate of being an option buyer versus being an option seller. Bullet point number one, I think, sums it all up. There's no inherent advantage either way. And with that, if you want to bring this up, whether it's better to sell naked options, sell spreads, or buy options, or buy spreads, or whatever the case may be, if you go to an option trade show where you have retail investors, where you have institutional investors, where you have option educators, exchange officials, whatever, this is one way to where if you're out at a gathering after the trade show in the lounge or whatever, and you say, I think it's stupid to buy options, you should only sell options. Or I think it's stupid to sell options, you should only buy options. you were to say that, I will bet you dollars to donuts you'll get into a long argument, you'll lose friends, you'll start wars, and you'll accomplish absolutely nothing with that argument. So I typically tend to stay away from that argument in general. It reminds me of arguing abortion and capital punishment. A lot of people have their opinions on those two subjects, but if you get into an argument on either of those two, in my opinion, it seldom if ever solves anything. It just gets the other person mad at the other thing. It's kind of like religion and politics as well. So with that being said, what's my opinion on should you be an option buyer versus an option seller? I think you should do both depending on your situation. In some instances, buying options works better, and in other instances, selling options works better. And we're going to do a demonstration of a little bit of both today for both purposes. Now, let's say that you want some exposure to the euro. You believe that the euro is going to go up in value versus the U.S. And once again, this is not, I repeat, this is not a recommendation, folks. This is just something with which I'm using as an example. And with the euro going up in exposure, you're thinking, well, you know what? I want to have some income. You know, I like the idea of having these foreign bonds, but quite frankly, Mike, you scared the bejeebers out of me when you're talking about the risks that are involved in investing in a foreign bond. So what's a way with which I can get some income and yet still have exposure to the euro? Now, let's say for this example with which we're going to be doing, we have $150,000 that we want to allocate to this, meaning that we want to get an income off of this $150,000, and we believe that the euro is going to go up in value. Now, we don't want to just go long the spot currency, or we don't want to do anything with like all the risk involved. We want income. So what's a way with which you can do that? Well, what I'm going to show you right now, and it's going to take me a second to do a little bit of clicking, but I have the control. Yeah, I have the control here, so I'm going to do this. We're going to take a look at the brokersXpress trade calculator. brokersXpress is the broker-dealer with which we use for our clients for managing their trade. So I'm just going to use the trade calculator to show you an EUU credit spread as well as a naked short put, both in the money and out of the money. So with that being said, what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to share my desktop. And you guys should be seeing the brokersXpress website. Is that, Steve, can you just do me a favor and just let me know if that's what you're seeing right now? Okay, well, it looks like we are, so what we're going to be doing...
Mike, you're perfectly clear. We can see brokersXpress website. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Steve. Sorry. Sometimes when you got to hit the mute when you got to hit the mute button on there, it takes sometimes I know when I've hosted these presentations and I've talked into it and said, yes, it is, and then I forget the mute button.
I had it on mute because sometimes if something's happening in the background, I try not to distract you. Sorry, I'm listening, but I'm just not. I had it on mute. Sorry.
Oh, no problem, no problem.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. To find more podcasts on options, stocks, alternative markets, and market data, please visit www.ise.com/podcasts.